We are deeply distressed for the young man and his family, but I think the outpouring in the United Kingdom has demonstrated that we won't be unsettled by this. We will look for causes. We continue to work with every part of the population in the United Kingdom to take away those elements that would seek to divide and to radicalise. And we all hope that such an incident like this will be the last of its kind.
That was UK Conservative MP Alistair Burt, and Mr. Burt was commenting on the horrific terror attack that happened near London's military barracks on Wednesday. 2 men hacked a British soldier to death in broad daylight. London police have arrested 2 people in connection with the murder. Security expert John Thompson joins us now with more. And John, you heard what Mr. Burt just said. I think it's very easy to sit at arm's length and say what he said. But what about the people who were there? What about the people who are on the streets and have seen this act of terrorism perpetrated right in their neighborhood?
Well, it also horrified everyone, but in his remarks, he right away fed into the fundamental error in dealing with terrorism. He started to say, we've got to find the causes. There is a cause, but we refuse to address it. And the cause is the enabling ideology, and we're often far too tolerant of it.
So what is the action that needs to be taken then?
Someone who gets out there and attacks someone like that, they're not necessarily mentally disturbed. These were people who, in the case of one of them, were converted and persuaded to a dysfunctional worldview. And the preachers and teachers who created that view and sustained it still practice openly. And remember, this is not just the UK. We're seeing attacks like this more and more often in Western Europe, and we'll probably be seeing them here too before too long.
Well, John, let's talk about the preachers and teachers, because I think you hit upon the very ideal that is inflicting this problem across the Western world. There are freedoms that are allowed because you live in the West, and those freedoms give you the right to say and pretty much do what you want as long as you don't contravene any laws. Now, teaching someone something doesn't necessarily contravene any laws. Do we need to change that?
Well, the problem is, it's not, the limitation has always been on free speech, is that I cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. And basically, the right of me to swing my arm goes as far as I'm not invading your space. In a more practical sense, I'm pretty well free to say what I like, but if I put myself up in white sheets, burn a cross on my front lawn, I can expect all sorts of opprobrium and restrictions on my behavior. Mm-hmm. If you are preaching that, the world is out to destroy you, everything you do to, the Western world is justified, you've got to decapitate the people and kill them, that Jews are pigs and monkeys, etc., 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 you should not be getting a free ride. I mean, your mosque should be padlocked, and you should be on the next plane out of the country.
How can we effectively govern against that, though?
Well, the
Charter of Rights guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to practice what you want within guidelines.
Here's where the fundamental conflict is. You cannot preach hate, even if you are a religion. And we are very, very accepting of religion, but we're butting into this one point that when a religion is preaching hate, or someone is preaching hate in the name of a religion, that we sort of back off and we allow these people to keep being conditioned. And of course, remember, we've seen this stuff before. There was the Dutch filmmaker who was stabbed to death, and the note was left in him. The attempts to kill the Danish cartoonists, or even actually 20 years ago. When everyone was looking for the author of the Satanic Verses. They couldn't find him, but they attacked and killed translators and publishers. We're going to be seeing a lot more of this unless we start to break the narrative that allows this sort of conditioning.
John, I shouldn't say the so-called war on terror, but I mean, let's call it that, the so-called war on terror. For people who see it and view it, they think it's sending armed forces into a country and extricating Taliban forces, Al-Qaeda forces. That is the war on terror for what people want to digest from what we put out on television and in newspapers on the internet. The war on terror, though, is the battle that happens here at home. The battle that happens when these people are out there preaching this hate. How do we keep that war on terror on the front lines?
Well, this is the point, is that it'll be kept on the front lines for us if we're not careful. And here again, you're already starting to see the damage control when people talking about, causes or alienation and everything else. And it's not. It is an ideology. Every terrorist Every single terrorist is someone who has made a deliberate choice to become involved in terrorism. And the way they launch their attack is because of the ideology that they've embraced, if it's far right, far left, or in this case, radical Islam. And there are people who shape that ideology. So there's always that deliberate choice that's always made, and they need to be responsible for that. And there's the people who allow and propagate that ideology, and you can't give them a free ride. Otherwise, you'll never, ever be able to fight it.
John, real quick, to wrap this up, we saw with Boston, we saw two men who looked like the American walking down the street. We see a gentleman in London who spoke like a Londoner. How can you effectively guard against that?
In many parts, you can't guard against it, but you can guard against the sources of information. Also, there has to be sort of a counter-propaganda. In other words, you can't let them receive nothing but a one-way flow.
All right, John, we always appreciate your perspective and your analysis. Thanks for this. That's security expert John Thompson, who joined us here in studio.